Kia ora everyone and welcome to HR Chats with me, Tarada. This is a series where we're chatting to some of New Zealand's leading lights in HR, but a range of interesting trends and ideas from the world of human resources. Hopefully it will provoke your curiosity and a diverse range of opinions from you, because we do have a diverse range of people lined up for you to enjoy. And if you have any interesting topics or anyone that you think we should speak to, happy to hear from you. We'll let you know how at the end of the podcast. But for today, a very special guest, Susan Lowe. Her 20-plus year career has spanned operational management, generalist HR management, as well as learning and organisational development in roles across the diverse FMCG, retail and trade sectors, both here in New Zealand and in the UK. She's fervent about all things people, but specifically about growing capability, managing talent, having innovative approaches to career and development, as well as future-proofing organisations through learning and culture. She is currently the People and Culture Director at Coca-Cola Amatil, and they are a best employer and employer of choice, recognised for their great culture. Hello, Susan.
Kia ora.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
When we see something like that, and most people in the HR world will know, a best employer and employer of choice, what does that mean?
I guess for our people, it means that we're recognised for what they really appreciate about being part of the Amatil New Zealand whānau. And the best employer, I think, means quite a lot to us because it is a global recognition, and we've been recognised 4 years in a row now as one of the best employers in Australasia across key metrics, whether that be what we do in diversity and inclusion, leadership or wellness. So having that, I guess, external review of what we do as a business and having that verified that we are doing the best that we can by our people, I think really is important to our team.
And I imagine it probably keeps you on your toes as well, because it's one thing to win something, but then to win it twice, or to be awarded it twice, and then 3 times, and then 4 times. Suddenly, the pressure becomes on, and suddenly, I guess, particularly with an organisation like Coca-Cola Amatil, there's a lot of eyes on you and how you treat people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we take that privileged position and think about how we can use it to help other organisations in New Zealand as well. So we do a lot of sharing of our initiatives. We partner with external organisations to help them to tell the story, whether that's Rainbow Tech or Gender Tech or Diversity Works, where we're an alliance partner. We really think about our role, because eyes are on us and because our brand is well known, how we can use that privileged position for good.
Yeah, and I guess you're an organisation with the clout to actually make some changes. And what are the changes we've seen? And I've really noticed this in the last couple of years, is that move away from the notion of health and safety to health and well-being. And you've got a lot of well-being programs there. How do you define well-being? What does it mean?
It's a really interesting one, and I think firstly, what I would say personally is well-being is such a vast topic, and I think it's no longer, to your point around the move from health and safety to a real focus on well-being, it's not simply physical. It encompasses a lot more than that. And so when I think about our definition, and we have a well-being program we call Healthy at Amatil, and that has 5 pillars, which at the most simplistic way of describing it really is physical well-being, mental well-being, financial well-being, nutritional well-being, and then also how people feel in terms of being connected, or the proactive elements of well-being. And so we take all of that to really enable our people to be their best selves. We take our role in helping people to be their best selves and how they show up every day quite seriously.
How long has that been it's probably been a concept for a while, but how long has it been something within your realm?
So Healthy at Amatil has existed for about 3.5 years now. And I think what's really interesting is a lot of the elements that we still do within the Healthy at Amatil program have actually existed far longer than that. But actually what we found as a business, that when they were disparate and sporadic, people actually didn't connect them together and see it as a wellbeing framework, or see it as wellbeing initiatives that were supporting them to be their best selves. And so actually by bringing it all together under that umbrella, that really helped people to understand exactly what was available, and what we did see wellbeing as being, which was much more than physical wellbeing.
What was the kind of spark for all of that? Was it part of a sort of a global trend? Was it a person who went, hey, you know what, I reckon we could do this? Why that kind of almost a shift in focus and a you know, a recognizing that all of these things need to come together and be something that you should be concerned about and stand up and argue for in front of your shareholders?
So it came from our people. So we pride ourselves in continuously listening to our employees and what they value and what they feel that we could be doing more of, or continuing or doing differently to really support them. And we found through our engagement survey that well-being, whilst was something that they appreciated, we saw as a priority, we could do more to really support them. And so that really sparked the action that we took, and the prioritization of bringing it together, and really being able to tell the story of what we do for wellbeing.
Yeah. So in some ways, you know, partly sort of a bottom up driven exercise. Yeah. So what does it mean in practice? How does, you know, Amatil NZ prioritize this on a day-to-day basis?
I guess it's really part of everything that we do. So it features in some way, shape or form, whether it be simply in a team meeting, there's a Healthy at Amatil session that might be part of that team meeting, or on a much grander scale, we have a Healthy at Amatil calendar. And so each month of the year is aligned to one of the pillars. And then within that, we'll have a focus. So one of the newest changes that we've made in response to feedback from our people is around sun safety during those summer months. And we introduced last year for the first time skin checks. So we fully subsidise for as many of our team that want to have their mole maps completed, and ensure that they've got all of the sun safety tips that they need. And that's just one of the examples. And we have those kinds of focuses throughout the entire year.
What's your favourite one? What do you one where you think, wow, this is really great, and people go, whoa, didn't expect that?
I have to say we do round the bays every year in Auckland, and whilst we have people up and down the country, we do have a critical mass of 1,200 employees here in Auckland, and we do round the bays, and it's a really nice event because people can do it with their families, not just by themselves. And so we see close to 500 of the extended Amatil family come together on hopefully a sunny day in Auckland to walk or run the 8.5 kilometres, and then we have a big family barbecue at the other end. So that's one of my favourites, because we get to see people's partners and children, and kind of everybody can take part, and it doesn't matter how physical you are or how long it takes you to do it. So I really like that, because it's kind of really connected to our culture.
Yeah, marvellous. How about the exec team? You know, you said it's a lot of it sort of came from the bottom. Now that it's there and in place, how does the exec team lead this? Or do they, or have they sort of just established some of those leadership roles in a way in something like this?
I think with any initiative, whether it's wellbeing or anything else, we have to remember that as executives, what we do is really visible. So I think it's leading by example, which is really important, and making sure in whatever way is relevant for each member of the exec team to really show that they prioritize their own wellbeing. They're making time for it, and they're leading by example, providing access to the initiatives for their team and those kinds of things.
Hmm. Now, obviously, we've just come through, extended period of unprecedented lockdown, and we've heard a lot of large companies talking about what they did during that kind of that period. What were the important aspects of wellbeing that you guys focused on during the COVID scenario?
It was probably quite a few, as you can probably imagine. It started for us as we thought about everybody transitioning into quite a different way of working. So for the majority of our non-manufacturing kind of operational employees, that was obviously reverting to working from home. So we produced a working from home guide that would enable people to ensure that they were well set up in their home environment, both in terms of being physically and ergonomically safe, but also then having really good rhythms and routines that enabled them to separate working from home from being at home, which we knew was going to be a really big challenge during lockdown. And then as we moved through that period of level 4 and level 3, obviously kind of, again, two streams, making sure that our people that were still coming to site were really safe. So we had the right screening and health checks and supporting people to be healthy while they were here. But at home, checking in on people's resilience, well-being, being very cognizant of things like burnout and people blurring the lines and working longer hours.
Because that is the real danger, wasn't it? That sort of common phrase, you're not, when you're at home working, you're not sort of working from home, you're sleeping at the office. And it can be very
Yes.
difficult for people who don't experience that to know when that cutoff is. Were any kind of practical examples of how that manifested itself?
Yeah, and we tried really hard through, so we were doing daily communications to our people from probably about 10 days before lockdown, and then right the way through until the end of level 2. And we use those communications to share hints and tips to keep well-being and trying to have good practical suggestions for that separation. So avoiding the sleeping at the office, like you say. To really help people. We took some of what we would have done physically here on site, like we have a yoga session once a week. And we had that run virtually. So it was live streamed, again, encouraging people, whereas they would have typically gotten up from the desk and gone and done the yoga session, to do exactly the same and do the yoga session from their front room. And we had Les Mills gym sessions streamed for our employees, and so did some of those physical ones. And then we did quite deliberately some very targeted, very COVID-related mental wellbeing support. We ran some parenting through COVID sessions, realizing that for those people that suddenly found themselves not just working from home, but parenting from home and trying to do both at the same time, that would be an incredibly challenging time for people. And so had some very targeted support in place for our parents.
Do you think if this had been 3 years ago or 5 years ago, the response would have been the same? Or have we moved substantially further into this sphere of the overall looking after of people, of employees?
I think absolutely the world has moved. I think employee expectation has shifted in terms of what they expect from their employer in this regard. And I also think organisations and their view on their role in regards to wellbeing has shifted. So I think
I was just going to say, and also, what's been really interesting is the organisation's role as the disseminator of information to people. Because we just assume that everybody, I suppose, has access to information. But the role of someone such as, particularly these bigger organisations, to say, this is what the government's saying. Here is what it means.
Absolutely, and we checked in via a survey twice, once at the beginning of level 3 and then again at the beginning of level 2 with our people, and that was actually one of the things that they gave us really positive feedback on, was because we were doing those daily communications, just how useful they found that and how clear they were around what was happening in New Zealand and what that meant for them in their role, in their personal life, and what support was available for them.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? People really expect almost instantaneous and very direct communication with their execs and their leadership and their management these days.
Yeah, and I think technology's played a role in that, in terms of just the accessibility and the of not just the accessibility, but probably the visibility, because it's very easy. And I know, I found actually some of the most effective things, rather than the comms that I would send once a day, was a couple of times just having my husband video me and then posting that video onto our internal social media platform. Got a lot of support, and I think almost feels more authentic as well.
Well, it's really using the medium, isn't it? It's all very well to send out, I suppose, an email or a PDF, but there's something about that kind of immediate human touch. It's a medium that people are very familiar with through Facebook Live or TikTok or Snapchat or whatever it is, and it's so I guess there's a real familiarity and an ability to access very directly that information.
Yeah.
How much of this, in this post-COVID world, what have you learned from that kind of COVID period, and how's that changed your notion of well-being now?
I think the big learning for us, which I think we already knew but really solidified through COVID, was we all experience things very, very differently, and that actually we have a role to play to normalise that and to talk to our people really transparently about the fact that that's okay. We did a big focus transitioning people back to the office, that we recognised that for some people they couldn't wait to get back to the office, and they couldn't wait to see, even from a social distance, the people that they worked with, but that there were also people that were extremely apprehensive, that hadn't left their bubble for over 7 weeks, and maybe didn't want to. So that
To be
role,
fair, I was one. I was one of those people. I was quite happy at home,
yes.
and we're still seeing it now, aren't we? We're still seeing that kind of apprehension and that fear played out in a lot of very strange ways, including people depressed, very angry at things. We're seeing a sort of a backlash against people coming back. Are you dealing with some of that kind of stuff as well?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've actually dealt with is what will still live on with us in this new world of work, if you like. So we launched Microsoft Teams right as we went into lockdown to help facilitate. We were going to do it anyway, to help facilitate collaboration, but it really enabled that virtual working that needed to take place during that lockdown period. But actually people have still embraced it, and so now people are saying, well, if I'm in the office but I'm still having my meetings via MS Teams, shouldn't I just be at home? Wouldn't that be easier? And so how do people kind of work out what that new kind of way of working is for them, and what features that they enjoyed during that lockdown period do they want to continue to have, and how do they integrate that?
Any unintended consequences of this kind of move to a lot more digital things that you've noticed from an HR or a personal or a well-being sort of area? Zoom fatigue, or a sense of sort of distancing, or a growth in understanding of people by seeing, that intimacy of seeing into people's houses?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a number of people feel much more connected because all of a sudden, people's wives and husbands or dogs and cats were involved in team meetings. So there's kind of a feeling of more intimate connection, which is a positive. I think one of the personal ones I experienced during lockdown, which I think is less positive, is I think when you're in an office-based environment, there is the bump into somebody in the corridor and have a really great conversation, or I've got a question, so I'll go and find that person and have that conversation. And because we didn't have the ability to do that, rather than people pick up the phone, people resorted to email. And actually that drove kind of a disconnection or a more siloed approach. And I think that's definitely something as we start to think about more flexible approaches to work and those becoming much more embedded in organizations we have to really watch out for.
Because it is one of those things that you have the serendipity or the chance meeting at the water cooler, particularly from people who aren't in the same team. They're in the little kitchen area and someone says, "Oh, I'm doing this thing," and they go, "Oh, actually, yeah, we've got an issue with that as well." So uh, interestingly, going forward, that may be one of the things that we have to really think about. How do you foster the chance meeting?
Absolutely. And I think also that the flow on impact for culture, that's one of the things that for me, I haven't quite worked out what the answer is, because I've worked in organizations that are fully work from home. And I've worked in organisations like ours where we're fortunately nearly everyone's on the same site here in Auckland. And the culture that creates and the feeling of connection and family is amazing. And how do we not lose that whilst we still encourage people to get balance and work from home or be more flexible? So I think if anyone's got some great suggestions for me or they've cracked it, I'd love to hear.
Because it will be a fantastic new source of innumerable conference presentations, I'm sure, on people who are doing things and importantly, I think the mistakes that people make. What about you personally? What do you do to prioritise your well-being? I mean, there you are in charge of a lot of other people's well-being. What do you do?
And I can't profess to be perfect at this at all. I think the three key things that are important for me is being aware of it. So making sure I'm tuned into how I'm feeling and what that means. So being aware of my mental and physical kind of state. Prioritizing it, so just making the time. I'm a classic for making an excuse on why not to get up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym. And lockdown was great because the gym was closed, so I didn't need to make excuses. And then I just think balance. So how do you integrate it and find out what's right for you and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and particularly now as well, that balance where those flexible times and that move for people to work differently, and I think we'll see a huge change in that, particularly around children and various other discussions. So there'll be organisations out there, people working for organisations who maybe haven't started this journey or they're not as far down the track in their wellbeing investment journey. What advice would you give them, both as an organisation and perhaps if they have to go and then sell this into an exec team or indeed to staff?
Yeah, I guess first of all, I'd say ask your people. Ask your people, what do they think? What do they want? What's their perception of what you currently do? I would definitely encourage people to think about what they already do, because you might actually be surprised that there's already a lot available to your people. Maybe you need to do a better job of communicating it or bringing it together like we did under an umbrella so that it's really clearly defined for people. And I think about what will work for your organization, because I think often people are unable to move forward in a really meaningful way with their wellness journey because they look to partner with a third-party provider. There's lots of them out there, but it can be very expensive, and a lot of New Zealand businesses just don't have the funds to be able to invest in that way, and you don't have to. We developed Healthy Amatil ourselves. It doesn't cost us a huge amount, but where we do spend the money, we make sure it's really impactful. So I'd encourage people to think about what's going to work for them, because it doesn't have to cost a fortune.
I mean, for some organisations, it could be as simple as a barbecue on a Friday night.
Absolutely.
Or having that, sometimes it probably helps to have that one really go-getting employee who's really keen on signing people up to some kind of event, and then, I guess, dragging people along.
Yeah. And lots of businesses will have partnerships they've not thought about leveraging for wellbeing. So every business has a bank, and banks will do sessions on why to prepare for retirement, or how to save well, or so a lot of that financial wellness is really important as well. And your bank will do sessions for you, and probably won't charge you anything for them either.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Thinking all about this and all of this change and that kind of rise in pastoral care. It's almost this sort of the opposite. Everyone's going on about, the nanny state takes care of everything. Here are organisations taking on almost a sort of a de facto pastoral care role, whether it's around financial or health. This is very, very different from probably 5 or 10 years ago, where you came to work and you did your job and you went away. Yeah. Will this continue, do you think? And obviously some of this was driven perhaps by that wanting to get the best people working for you. There was low unemployment, and so you wanted to attract people, you wanted to retain people, most importantly. Will people put a less priority on this, do you think, into the future when the employment figures aren't as good as they are now? Or will this be something that stays?
I think this will stay, and I think it'll continue to evolve and become more important. I think employee experience is now something that people place value on. So they're not looking for that transactional relationship with their employer, which is I turn up for work, I do my role, I go home, and in exchange I expect to be paid, and that's an equitable relationship. People are looking for much more from their employer, and we know that when people feel connected and feel valued and feel cared for, then they're more loyal, they're likely to be more productive, and so actually then there's the exchange and the benefit, and so I think you'll continue to see businesses invest in employee experience, and wellness just being one example of that.
Well, I think it's excellent. And it is, it's still got wellness, encompasses all of takes that kind of, health and safety thing and turns it into something actually broader to say, we're concerned about you and your families and the whole, and actually extending that throughout to communities as well. You've been in this business for 20 plus years. Single best change, and if there's something that you think 20 years ago to now we went, I thought that would have changed, if you know what I mean. So best change and thing that you thought might have also changed on the spot.
Yeah, those are hard questions. The things I thought would have changed.
Did you anticipate a conversation about wellness?
No, probably not. And that certainly wasn't part of my, employer's offering when I first joined the workforce. I think what I thought maybe might have changed from, over 20 years ago is that whole concept of the future of work. And we always talk about it. The reality is the future is already here. And I think we often think that things are going to radically change. And certainly technology has changed. And I think now I don't know how I survived before I had an iPhone. That it helps just from a productivity and a kind of work-life integration perspective. So changes from technology have made a difference, but then I think often we think that the change is coming and it's going to be much greater than it actually is, instead of focusing on the world of work is already here, and how do we make the best of our employees and enable them to be their whole self, their best self every day, rather than thinking about some big change that's going to happen in 5 or 10 years' time. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it did. And it is an interesting one. We're always looking to the future, and we're forgetting that actually the future is right now. It's right here, and this is the future we need to invest in. And having healthy, strong, and I use the word healthy across its broadest possible sort of sense, employees and their families is, it's a crucial part of the world we live in today. Marvelous. Thank you. Any last comments?
No, I would just encourage anyone who has any involvement in this, in their organisation, to make sure they prioritise doing something for their people, because they will really value and appreciate that in return.
Yeah. And I think what I've taken from this as well is that sense that actually you might already be doing some of this. You just haven't put a label on it, and you haven't put it, not siloed it, but put it into a box and gone, hey, this is this thing that we do that we haven't really thought about. We just started years ago. That's actually a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Marvelous. Susan Lowe, she is the People and Culture Director at Coca-Cola Amatil. Thank you for some lovely insights into not only what you're doing there, but your sort of personal journey as well in the world of HR. You've been listening to HR Chats with me, Terada, the series where we chat to some of the leading lights in New Zealand's HR world. And as we said at the start, if there's any interesting topics or anyone that you think we should have a chat with, then by all means contact us. It's very simple. You can go to the podcast page. You're probably already there right now on the HRNZ website and click Contact HRNZ. Send us an email, let us know, and we'll be back again in the future.